to address climate change is too high. The Kingdom of Eswatini is fully involved in working towards a knowledge-based economy through the science, technology, and innovation infrastructure in a bid to facilitate research and enhance development. The Royal Science and Technology Park in the country notably advances scientific research, promotes startup enterprises, and innovation labs. We appreciate the friends of the Kingdom of Eswatini who support us in these initiatives. The country still seeks more support to strengthen our knowledge-based programs as they enable us in attaining our National Vision 2022 and the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We are committed to becoming one of the leading pioneers and role models to achieve the SDGs in Africa. We remain confident that the SDGs and Agenda 2063 of the African Union will continue to give us the proper guidance and impetus necessary to eradicate poverty and create inclusive and sustainable development for all. We commend the close partnership between the UN and the people of Eswatini, which guarantees that the SDGs are fully integrated into our planning processes. In this regard, we have launched a 5-year strategic roadmap for the period 2019-2023 that will ensure sustainable economic development, financial stability, and growth to improve the quality of life of Eswatini, of Mswati. The roadmap has 5 key sectors based on their ability to grow our GDP, create employment, and mobilize revenue, being manufacturing, agriculture, mining, and energy, tourism, and education and ICT. No nation can develop past its educational capacity, particularly that of its teachers. As we all strive to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all, we also need to render the necessary assistance to countries that need help in developing. We need to guarantee access to free and quality primary and secondary education, as well as affordable and inclusive vocational and technical education, while paying attention to opportunities available to disabled children, the boy and the girl child. I am pleased to share with the global community that the Kingdom of Eswatini has embarked on these initiatives, and we can see positive results. Mr. President, we all know young people face a variety of challenges which require a comprehensive, coordinated, and multilateral response. We are a youthful world with more than half the global population under the age of 30. We therefore need strategies to encourage the labor market to absorb the growing young working class and ensure that they are appropriately trained for the needs of our markets. We also need to develop programs aimed at increasing opportunities for our young people to start their own businesses. Mr. President, the United Nations speed of leaving no one behind will remain elusive if we continue to deprive other nations of the world the opportunity to play a pivotal role in the affairs of this august Universal Assembly. We firmly believe that Taiwan is essential to the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The inclusion of Taiwan is a crucial step in realizing our pledge as stipulated in the preamble of the UN General Assembly Resolution 71 adopted on September 25, 2015. We call on the UN once again to uphold the principle of universality and its multilateral efforts towards total inclusion and to allow Taiwan to participate in relevant extensions on a dignified and equal footing. Let me reiterate the Kingdom's keenness to prioritizing the overall implementation of the 2030 Agenda and Africa's Agenda 2063. Like other middle-income countries, among the challenges we face is the decline of official development assistance due to our categorization. This has worked against our development and poverty reduction efforts. To this end, we strongly advocate for a reassessment of the reality on the ground when official development assistance is allocated to countries most in need. Finally, Mr. President, we pledge our support to effective multilateralism that aims at enforcing inclusion, promoting quality education, peace and security for all, and uplifting countries from all forms of poverty. Addressing all challenges engulfing the United Nations family is our first commitment. We wish to acknowledge the UN Secretary General and his entire staff for continuing to steer the affairs of the Secretariat with focused commitment to the UN pursuit of global peace and security, equity and justice, and inclusiveness in all matters of the organization. We are strongly convinced that together we shall overcome all that matters that appear as impossibilities as we continue to strive for unity, solidarity, and mutual benefit, and above all, galvanizing all efforts towards achieving a better world for all and everywhere. I thank you. May Almighty God bless us all.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the head of state of the Kingdom of Eswatini for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Hassan Rouhani, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Hassan Rouhani, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we invite him to address the Assembly.
In the name of God, most compassionate, the most merciful, may blessings and the praise be upon the Prophet Muhammad. Mr. President, I would like to congratulate your deserved election as the President of the 74th General Assembly of the United Nations, and wish you success and good luck for your Excellency and the Honorable Secretary General. At the outset, I would like to commemorate the freedom-seeking movement of Hussein, peace be upon him, and pay homage to all the freedom seekers of the world who do not bow to oppression and aggression and tolerate all the hardship of the struggle for rights, as well as to the spirits of all the oppressed martyrs of terrorist strikes and bombardments in Yemen, Syria, occupied Palestine, Afghanistan, and other countries of the world, including Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, the Middle East is burning in the flames of war, bloodshed, aggression, occupation, and religious and sectarian fanaticism and extremism. And under such circumstances, the suppressed people of Palestine are the biggest victims. Discrimination, appropriation of lands, settlement expansions, and killings continue to be practiced against the Palestinians. The US and Zionist imposed plans, such as the deal of the century, recognizing Beit al-Muqaddas as the capital of the Zionist regime and the accession of the Syrian Golan to the occupied territories, are certainly doomed. As against the US destructive plans, the Islamic Republic of Iran's regional and international assistance and cooperation on security and counterterrorism have been so much decisive. The clear example of such an approach is our cooperation with Russia and Turkey within the Astana format on the Syrian crisis and our peace proposal for Yemen, in view of our active cooperation with the special envoys of the Secretary General of the United Nations, as well as our efforts to facilitate reconciliation talks among the Yemen parties with the 4 European countries, which resulted in the conclusion of the Stockholm Peace Accord on Hodeidah port. Distinguished participants, I hail from a country that has resisted the most merciless economic terrorism and has defended its rights to independence and science and technology development. The US government, while imposing extraterritorial sanctions and threats against other nations, has made a lot of efforts to deprive Iran from the advantages of participating in the global economy, and has resorted to international piracy by misusing the international banking system. We Iranians have been the pioneers of freedom-seeking movements in the region, while seeking peace and progress for our nation as well as our neighbors. And we have never surrendered to foreign aggression and imposition. We cannot believe the invitation to negotiation of people who claim to have applied the harshest sanctions of history against the dignity and prosperity of our nation. How someone can believe that the silent killing of a great nation and pressure on the life of 83 million Iranians, particularly women and children, are welcomed by the American government officials who pride themselves on such pressures and exploit sanctions in an addictive manner against a spectrum of countries such as Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, China, and Russia. The Iranian nation will never, ever forget and forgive these crimes and these criminals. Ladies and gentlemen, the attitude of the incumbent US government towards the nuclear deal or the JCPOA not only violates the provisions of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231, but also constitutes a breach of the sovereignty and political and economic independence of all of the world's countries. In spite of the American withdrawal from the JCPOA, and for 1 year, Iran remained fully faithful to all of its nuclear commitments in accordance with the JCPOA. Out of respect for the Security Council resolution, we provided Europe with the opportunity to fulfill its 11 commitments made to compensate for the US withdrawal. However, unfortunately, we only heard beautiful words while witnessing no effective measures. It has now become clear for all that the United States turns back to its commitments, and Europe is unable and incapable of fulfilling its commitments. We even adopted a step-by-step approach in implementing paragraphs 26 and 36 of the JCPOA. And we remain committed to our promises in the deal. However, our patience has a limit. When the US does not respect the United Nations Security Council resolutions, and when Europe displays inability, the only way shall be to rely on national dignity, pride, and strength. They call us to negotiations. while they run away from treaties and deals. We negotiated with the incumbent US government on the 5+1 negotiating table. However, they failed to honor the commitment made by their predecessor. On behalf of my nation and state, I would like to announce that our response to any negotiation under sanctions is negative. The government and people of Iran have remained steadfast against the harshest sanctions in the past 1.5 years, and will never negotiate with an enemy that seeks to make Iran surrender with the weapon of poverty, pressure, and sanctions. If you require a positive answer, and as declared by the leader of the Islamic Revolution, the only way for talks to begin is to return to commitments and compliance. If you are sensitive to the name of JCPOA, well, then you can return to its framework and abide by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2231. Stop the sanctions so as to open the way for the start of negotiations. I would like to make it crystal clear. If you are satisfied with the minimums, we will also convince ourselves with the minimums, either for you or for us. The JCPOA was a minimum for you and for us. However, if you wish more, if you require more, you should also give and pay more. If you stand on your word that you only have one demand for Iran, i.e. non-production and non-utilization of nuclear weapons, then it could easily be attained in view of the IAEA supervision, and more importantly, with the fatwa of the Iranian leader. Instead of a show of negotiations, you shall return to the reality of negotiations. Memorial photos are the last station of negotiations, not the first one. Ladies and gentlemen, we in Iran, despite all of the obstructions created by the US government, are keeping on the path of economic and social growth and prosperity. Iran's economy in 2017 registered the highest economic growth rate in the world. And today, despite fluctuations emanating from foreign interference, in the past 1.5 years, we have returned to the track of growth and stability. Iran's gross domestic product, minus oil, has become positive again in recent months, and the trade balance of the country remains positive. Distinguished participants, the security doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran is based on the maintenance of peace and stability in the Persian Gulf and providing freedom of navigation and safety of movement in the Strait of Hormuz. Recent incidents have seriously endangered such security. Security and peace in the Persian Gulf, Sea of Oman, and the Strait of Hormuz could be provided with the participation of the countries of the region, and the free flow of oil and other energy resources could be guaranteed, provided that we consider security as an umbrella in all areas for all of the countries. upon the historical responsibility of my country in maintaining security, peace, stability, and progress in the Persian Gulf region and Strait of Hormuz, I should like to invite all the countries directly affected by the developments in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz to the Coalition of Hope, meaning Hormuz peace endeavor. The goal of the Coalition for Hope is to promote peace, stability, progress, and welfare for all of the residents of the Strait of Hormuz region, and enhance mutual understanding and peaceful and friendly relations amongst them. This initiative includes various venues for cooperation, such as the collective supply of energy security, freedom of navigation, and free transfer of oil and other resources to and from the Strait of Hormuz and beyond. The Coalition for Hope is based on important principles such as compliance with the goals and principles of the United Nations, mutual respect, equal footing, dialogue and understanding, respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, inviolability of international borders, peaceful settlement of all differences, and more importantly, two fundamental principles of non-aggression and non-interference in the domestic affairs of each other. The presence of the United Nations seems necessary for the creation of an international umbrella in support of the Coalition of Hope. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Iran shall provide more details of the Coalition of Hope to the beneficiary states. Ladies and gentlemen, the formation of any security coalition, an initiative under any title in the region with the centrality and command of foreign forces, is a clear example of interference in the affairs of the region. The securitization of navigation is in contravention to the right to free navigation and the right to development, and would escalate tensions and more complication of conditions and increase of mistrust in the region, while jeopardizing regional peace, security, and stability. The security of our region shall be provided when American troops pull out. Security shall not be supplied with American weapons and intervention. The United States, after 18 years, has failed to reduce acts of terrorism. However, the Islamic Republic of Iran managed to terminate the scourge of Daesh with the assistance of neighboring nations and governments. The ultimate way towards peace and security in the Middle East passes through inward democracy and outward diplomacy. Security cannot be purchased or supplied by foreign governments. The peace, security, and independence of our neighbors is the peace, security, and independence of us. America is not our neighbor. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran which neighbors you. And we have been long taught that neighbor comes first, then comes the house. In the event of an incident, you and we shall remain alone. We are neighbors with each other and not with the United States. The United States is located here, not in the Middle East. The United States is not the advocate of any nation. Neither is the guardian of any state. In fact, states do not delegate power to attorney to other states and do not give custodianship to others. If the flames of the fire of Yemen have spread today to Hijaz, the warmonger should be sought and punished rather than leveling allegations and grudge against the innocent. The security of Saudi Arabia shall be guaranteed with the termination of aggression to Yemen rather than by inviting foreigners. We are ready to spend our national strength and regional credibility and international authority. The solution for peace in the Arabian Peninsula, security in the Persian Gulf, and stability in the Middle East should be sought inside the region rather than outside of it. The issues of the region are bigger and more important than the United States is able to resolve. The United States has failed to resolve the issue in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and has been the supporter of extremism, Talibanism, and Daeshism. Such a government is clearly unable to resolve more sophisticated issues of today. Distinguished colleagues, our region is on the edge of collapse as a single blunder can fuel a big fire. We shall not tolerate the provocative intervention of foreigners. We shall respond decisively and strongly to any sort of transgression to and violation of our security and territorial integrity. However, the alternative and proper solution for us is to strengthen consolidation among all the nations with common interests in the Persian Gulf and the Hormuz region. This is the message of the Iranian nation. Let's invest on hope towards a better future rather than in war and violence. Let's return to justice, to peace, to law, commitment and promise, and finally to the negotiating table. I thank you all for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state. The Assembly will hear an address from His Excellency Esang Remengesau, President of the Republic of Palau. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Esang Remengesau, President of the Republic of Palau, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by congratulating His Excellency Tijani Muhammad Bandi on becoming President of the 74th session of the General Assembly. I applaud your emphasis on implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and Palau looks forward to further working with you in this important priority. Let me also express my thanks to your predecessor, Madam Maria Fernanda Espinosa Carcias, for her leadership over the past year. I also want to express my deep condolences to the people of the Bahamas and all the victims of Hurricane Dorian. Please know that as fellow islanders, the people of Palau stand in solidarity with you. Mr. President, I would like to recall the words of my predecessor in his first address to the United Nations General Assembly 25 years ago, after Palau was formally admitted as the 185th member of the United Nations. He said, and I quote, "My country, with approximately 20,000 citizens, will be one of the smallest members of this organization. But we are large in the things that count: a strong cultural heritage, a commitment to human rights, and a democratic government. Resources, both human and marine, which we are particularly proud of, and most of all, the support and friendship of our brothers and sisters in the international family of nations." End of quote. On the eve of our 25th anniversary of independence, these words still ring true. To my predecessor's list, I would only add that large is Palau's sense of responsibility for protecting the marine environment and the climate system. As a large ocean state, we strongly believe that our small island nation has a lot to contribute to these global efforts. And this important work must begin at home. In this regard, my government had the pleasure to present its first voluntary national review to the high-level political forum at ECOSOC. The VNR recognized our important achievements, such as universal education, ending hunger, and establishing our protected area network. Palau has proclaimed 2019 as the year of innovative learning and excellence, in recognition that our people are our greatest resource. Improving education and developing our human capital is necessary to thrive in a globalized world. Palau's progress to achieving near universal health coverage is another recent achievement. But challenges remain to improving the quality of healthcare and durability of healthcare systems in the face of climate crisis. However, our VNR also identified areas requiring greater attention, which includes improving nutrition, transitioning to a low-carbon energy system, and building the resilience of our public infrastructures and essential public services. In my address last year, I highlighted the prevalence of non-communicable diseases in Palau, which has one of the highest rates of obesity in the world. One step since then has been a directive that I signed for all government food service systems to serve pelagic fish as a way of encouraging traditional, healthier diets. However, this issue deserves much greater attention at the United Nations. Mr. President, sustainable marine protection has been a tradition in Palau that extends back thousands of years. For most of our history, the greatest threat came from overfishing. When fisheries started to decline, the elders would call for a bull prohibition, and all fishing in an area would cease. Knowing when to exercise restraint has been key to the sustainable management of our marine environment. Today, Palau has some of the most well-preserved coral reef ecosystems in the world. However, we now face many challenges brought on by a globalized world. Today, local fishermen are not the only ones trolling our waters, and climate crisis threatens to render island lives and livelihoods untenable. And so, like our ancestors before, Palau has once again called a bull prohibition, but this time at a scale the world has rarely seen. In just a few months from now, on the 1st of January 2020, the Palau National Marine Sanctuary will enter its implementation phase. 80% of our exclusive economic zone, some 500,000 square kilometers of ocean, will be protected as a no-take area. The remaining 25% will be open to artisanal fishing, where we also intend to develop our domestic fishing industry. Our ocean is a precious resource, and we need to safeguard its health so that future generations can continue to benefit from its abundance. We also look forward to hosting the 7th Our Ocean Conference next August. We aim to galvanize further momentum on ocean actions, as well as to take stock of what we have achieved so far and what remains to be done for the protection of our oceans. As co-chair of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, I am working with 13 other serving heads of state to rebalance humanity's contract with the ocean. As the panel continues to develop its recommendations for achieving a sustainable ocean economy ahead of next year's second UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, we reiterate our invitation to industry and the private sector to join us in this effort. We also look forward to the successful conclusion of negotiations and adoption of a new treaty on high seas biodiversity that will set the multilateral framework for us to effectively protect the high seas and complement our national efforts. Mr. President, today, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change completed its special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. Its warnings about the impacts of climate crisis on the ocean paint a picture of ocean neglect, of warming and acidifying seas, which threatens fish life cycles and coral reefs. For a country like Palau, whose economy, culture, and way of life are dependent on the ocean, this is of existential concern. But the IPCC's report also tells us that the health of the ocean should concern all countries. If we are going to slow and stop the worst effects of climate crisis, we cannot do so without turning to the ocean. This week, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy has also launched its call for ocean-based climate action to support the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. Investing in nature-based solutions, decarbonizing ocean industries, and securing sustainable food are solutions that we can all take collectively. I would like to thank the Secretary General for his leadership in convening this week's Climate Action Summit. Palau is honored to have been a member of the Energy Transition Track for the Climate Action Summit and to have presented and developed the SEAT Sustainable Energy Package. This is part of the commitment by small island developing states to systematically and ambitiously transition to low-carbon economies. This SEAT Sustainable Energy Package seeks to build the partnerships that generate action on the ground by scaling up the SEAT's Lighthouse Initiative. SEATs will be empowered to develop ambitious and achievable plans for renewable energy and attract new investment. In Palau, we are about to begin the task of installing the world's largest microgrid, which will enable us to meet our nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement well ahead of 2025. The formation of a public-private partnership has been critical to this endeavor. It is also vital that we see an ambitious response by our developed country brothers and sisters to replenish the Green Climate Fund. We thank those that have recently announced new commitments this week: Denmark, Sweden, Monaco, South Korea, and others. And we look forward to others coming forward to also increase their ambition of support. Mr. President, you have identified next year's 75th anniversary of the United Nations as an important opportunity to reduce the trust deficit among nations. As part of this work to revitalize multilateralism, our UN institutions must be fit for purpose. In this regard, reform of the UN Security Council remains an urgent task. We urge you, together with the Secretary General, to undertake consultations to advance the reform process and ensure that the Security Council better reflects the geopolitical realities of the world today. The Security Council must also be prepared to take on the most pressing security challenges of our generation, and so we reiterate the call of Pacific Islands for the appointment of a special representative of the Secretary General on Climate and Security. Mr. President, our pathway to realizing the 2030 Agenda is enabled by a strong multilateral system. The declaration adopted at the SDG Summit reminds us that the accelerated action depends on accessible means of implementation. While Palau has made considerable gains in some key areas, progress can be greatly accelerated by durable partnerships and greater multilateral cooperation that takes into consideration the needs of small island developing states. The midterm review of the Samoa pathway also reiterates the special needs and circumstances of SEEDs and emphasizes the importance of scaling up modalities of financing. In particular, we welcome its recognition of the limitations of an income-only measure of development and its call to deepen and enhance partnerships with SEEDs. As was made tragically clear in the Bahamas, our vulnerabilities as SEEDs to disasters and climate impacts are unique and threaten to undermine all our sustainable development efforts. Implementing the Secretary General's recommendations for reform of the UN development system also remains an essential objective, so that no country is left behind. Therefore, I look forward to the establishment of a UN multi-country office in the North Pacific. As affirmed by the Micronesian President Summit earlier this year, basing the MCO in one of the North Pacific countries will bring greater coherence to development support in the region and enhance the efforts of Micronesian SEEDs to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Our collective commitment to leave no country behind also demands that we end our exclusion of Taiwan and its 23 million people. This should apply here in the General Assembly as well as in the range of international bodies that are so essential to establishing effective multilateralism, such as the World Health Assembly, International Civil Aviation Organization, and UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We know from our partnership with Taiwan about the strength of its commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals and its equal and dignified participation in the 2030 Agenda processes will only strengthen our global effort to realize this agenda. The United States has been our longest friend, with our histories deeply intertwined. We share its commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are proud of our close relationship through our Compact of Free Association and look forward to beginning discussions on its renewal. One early step in our national journey was the development of our maritime capabilities to secure our large EEZ. Australia stepped forward to support this through the donation of a patrol boat in 1996. We are delighted that Australia has extended its commitment to the Pacific Patrol Boat Program and will be replacing the PSS Remengesau with the delivery of new patrol boat in 2020. In particular, Australia's long record of support for capacity building for marine law enforcement has been especially important in preparations for the implementation of the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. The government of India has been a growing partner in the fields of health through support for our healthcare systems and diffusing small-scale solar technology through Palauans who have now been trained as solar mamas. We view with concern North Korea's recent ballistic missile launches that violate UN Security Council resolutions, which threatens peace and stability in our region and around the world. Weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missiles of all ranges must be dismantled, and the cooperation of all states is essential to fully implement relevant Security Council resolutions. Mr. President, it seems like the last 25 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The first generation of Palauans, born to an independent republic, are already coming of age. Now, our second generation of independent Palauans are just starting school. I am very confident that they can look forward to another 25 years in a country that is large in the things that count, large in its commitment to friendship and solidarity with this great family of nations. I am hopeful that they will live in a world that has seized this critical moment in history to avert the worst effects of the climate crisis. A world that has rebalanced its relationship with the land, the atmosphere, and the oceans. A world that works with nature and not against her. This family is what gives me hope. It is what gives the people of Palau hope. I thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Palau for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Salome Zourabichvili, President of Georgia. I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. Zourabichvili. I have a problem with pronouncing words. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations Her Excellency Salome Zourabichvili, President of Georgia, and we invite her to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is an honor to address you today as the President of Georgia. Georgia is a small country on the edge of Europe, which for the past 28 years has experienced quite a few shocks and transformation. Recovering its independence, opening of borders, first wave of globalization, shifting to market economy, and it has endured open or protracted conflicts, war, and occupation. At the same time, and despite all, Georgia is one of the democratic countries of the world which develops economically and socially and remains one of the main islands of stability in a complex region. We are a country with a small population, but we know very well the price of solidarity. Given our location, we know that we are an integral part of a region where without peace, global challenges cannot and will not be overcome. We're also fully conscious that the destiny of the planet is also our destiny. Mr. President, Georgia, as all here present, faces the global challenges that defy today's world. Climate change, erosion of biodiversity, universal and accessible health, education for all, overcoming poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. The 17 SDGs, as inscribed in the Agenda 2030 to counter these challenges, are all essential. They are the path towards a radical transformation, both of the way we look at the world and of our own behavior patterns. The only way to overcome the global challenges is seeing and treating them as a whole, as a complex, multifaceted threat. And this is far from easy. The world is much more complex, and so is the answer to be found to these challenges. We need more systemic approaches and holistic thinking. Georgia will put all its efforts to progress toward the 2030 agenda goals, together with all actors in the society, be they public or private, together with its neighbors and partners. For solidarity and joining efforts are key to success. That is why we are all here today. That is why we believe in the necessary conciliation between sovereignty and multilateralism. Mr. President, while we are looking towards 2030 and determined to achieve our common goals, there are some more immediate challenges that we have to overcome in order to succeed. We need new thoughts. We have to dare and experiment, elaborate new options, and we can no longer be afraid of initiatives. And what is true for the world is true for Georgia. Our very first challenge, and hence our priority, is peace. Peace is the ultimate goal of every society, but it's the very essence and the raison d'être of the United Nations. Global security is a global challenge. Wars, conflicts, and terrorism pose a clear and massive threat to the lives of millions of citizens and provoke massive migrations and hordes of refugees. We share the grief of the families of the victims of terrorism. We understand the fear and the anger, and we take our share of the common fight against this invisible enemy. Georgia is thus contributing substantially to the peace missions, be it yesterday in Iraq or today in Afghanistan, in Mali or in Central Africa, far from our borders, but close to us out of our duty of solidarity. War and conflicts have been part of our history. For centuries, Georgia suffered numerous invasions and numerous invaders. Tbilisi, its capital city, was burned down 26 times. Its territory, parts of the territory, was occupied for short or long periods. Its religion and identity were actively suppressed at times. but it survived. And today, we proudly remain on the map of independent, sovereign, and democratic countries. This resilience is still our answer when confronting the tragedy that has been the 2008 war, followed by the occupation of 20% of our territory by Russia. As the President of Georgia, I have to speak out here on the plight of our people living on the administrative border boundary line that divides relatives between themselves, villages, where incidents and provocations have become constant, where illegal borderization is actively pursued, preventing normal, peaceful life for our citizens. I have to speak out for our citizens living in the occupied territories of Abkhazia and Rouhani, where continuous are the violations of human rights, restrictions to freedom of movement, of access to health and education services. The crossing points to both regions are closed on and off, causing immense humanitarian suffering. I have to speak out and warn the world. In the occupied Abkhazia, not only the Georgian language, but Abkhaz language, which the Georgian constitution recognizes and which I have to defend as the President of Georgia, and their identity are on the verge of disappearance. Abkhazian people suffer a drastic demographic reduction. And may I warn you, the world without Abkhazian language, identity, and traditions will be a much poorer place. We all have to unite to protect and save this rich cultural diversity that made at one time the Arabs call the Caucasus the mountain of languages. I have to speak out for our own IDPs and refugees that for now decades have been unable to return to their homes and land. Mr. President, our answer to the tragedy of war and occupation has been multifold. Our answer has been to preserve peace and development by keeping our word and respecting to the letter our commitments under the ceasefire agreement of 2008. Hence, we have no military forces whatsoever close to the occupation line, and Georgia has unilaterally renounced the use of force. Our answer has also been our extended hand, the peace program Step to a Better Future, allowing citizens from the occupied territories access, whenever they are not prevented from doing so, to health or education, sharing business opportunities, and to take part, albeit, alas, marginally, in Georgia's economic development. Our answer has been openness and tolerance. Last year, for instance, we received 1,500,000 Russian tourists without any incident to be recorded. Our answer has been to maintain our determined path of development, both economic and democratic, not to let anything divert us from our ambitions and concrete goals of European and Euro-Atlantic integration. And we have managed to make a remarkable progress in all these directions without ever changing our course, without ever counting our efforts, with always a clear vision of our destiny. That is, to some extent, our peaceful victory over war and occupation, over tragedy and destructions. But when we talk about the goal of peace and about ending conflict and occupation, we have also to act. We need movement and we need diplomacy. We have renounced the use of force, but we have not renounced dialogue. We are resilient, But we are not reconciled and resigned to the status quo. We need to make changes happen, and that is what we cannot do alone. We need the engagement of all towards the objective of a sustainable peace in this region. We need to raise the political dimension of the existing formats in order to allow finally discussions on substance. We need to move from experts' discussion to a real political negotiation. Political will from all sides is needed to make the Geneva format, for instance, an instrument for solving the conflict and not solely managing it. Political will is needed to invent, if necessary, new formats, and every forum and dialogue, formal or informal, should be used to engage Russia in discussions on the strict implementation of the ceasefire agreement, on allowing the UMM, as was agreed, to monitor the whole of the Georgian territory. For de-escalation on the occupation line is our very first priority, and that should pave then the way towards an effective settlement. It should also be very clear that new conflicts should not make the old ones be forgotten, for that would be a destructive message, for peace is not divisible. Mr. President, peace is not only challenged by war, but it is also increasingly challenged by a new internal threat that is gradually affecting all of our states and societies. Polarization, erosion of civil values and of mutual respect, hate speech, fake news, conspiracy theories are creating a black hole, undermining the fabric of our society, eroding the foundations of democracy. The answer is there, in front of us, in revamping our traditional values. Tolerance is one, and is a very essential one. For pluralism is only an empty word if it doesn't mean respect for the ideas of others. Georgia, which has been for centuries a model for religious, ethnic, and cultural tolerance and openness, could be at the forefront of a battle that needs to involve us all. International society has to be made of free citizens and healthy societies. We cannot achieve anything, nor SDG goals, if from within we are weakened, divided, and fighting each other. That is my appeal to my fellow Georgians, but not only to Georgians. Mr. President, overcoming poverty has been the major concern for Georgian governments. Struggling to modernize and raise our economy to international standards is to make its place on world markets, better using its unique standing between the European and the Asian markets to which it has free access. Georgia is on the right path to sustainable growth. But we need more. Education and qualification is key to overcoming unemployment and poverty. It is not only a fundamental right of any human being, but a vital condition for sustainable development of any country. Ensuring quality and affordable education is thus one of the main priorities of Georgia today and a declared cornerstone for the development. Our priority is not only in words, but it's also in numbers, and the education budget is planned to increase and reach 6% of the GDP in 2022. We have undertaken a number of reforms aimed at transforming our education system to raise free citizens and be competitive on the international platform. Science and technology, research and innovation are the basis for our future development, and we attach a great importance to the internationalization of education by cooperating with leading European and American institutions and opening also to foreign students. Georgian students are eager to become part of the larger world, and the 3,600 students have already taken part in the Erasmus European programs. Distinguished delegates, migration has become our common plight, generating fears and anxieties all over. Some countries, because they are losing their vital forces, their brains, their younger generation to the outside world, and fear for their future decline. Others, because they see foreign migrants arriving massively, fear they are going to take the natives' jobs and dilute their national identity. Some migrants are legally moving to countries with better opportunities. Most are illegal and looking for what they do not find in their home countries. But most are still fleeing their native countries because of war, destruction, persecution. In addition, climatic changes are on the verge of producing a massive new category of migrants, those that will leave territories turning to deserts or flooded by rising seas or destroyed by hurricanes or by fires. On this issue too, the answers need to be global. States need to find common approaches to regulate what cannot be stopped. Georgia, which today is confronted to both immigration and immigration in addition to its 300,000 internally displaced persons, is actively looking for solutions. Reducing illegal migration is a necessity in order to preserve one of the most precious benefits of our European integration process, and that is visa liberalization. Beyond better controls at the borders, which are needed and are underway, but short of reinstating a strict visa procedure, there are solutions. One is to increase the standards of living and bringing in the country social protection, job security, and the quality of life that most immigrants are seeking elsewhere. And Georgia sees its European integration path as the most direct way in that direction, and we are on that road. The second path is to regulate the flows by bilateral or multilateral agreements between states to allow for legal and temporary employment in the fields that are of mutual interest. Georgia is actively working to develop agreements on circular migration with its main partners. Uncontrolled and regulated migrations will remain a factor of major disruption that could affect peace and stability, but managed and regulated migrations can become assets for better mutual understanding and communication between cultures and civilizations, vectors for more tolerance and mutually enriching experiences. Mr. President, I represent a country which by mythology is linked to health and medicines through Medea, the goddess of medicine. Therefore, it's not surprising that we attach traditionally a major value to health. Not surprising that we have produced outstanding doctors that have spread through the world. Georgia is increasingly becoming a destination for health tourism because of its numerous thermal resorts which are being modernized. We share the core principle that health is the inalienable right of every human being, and that means providing universal and affordable access to quality health services. This inalienable right is threatened today by the rising cost of treatments and medicines. In today's world, we cure more and more illnesses. Medicine makes incredible miracles, but the costs are rising exponentially, challenging social budgets, public services, and individual resources. Georgia has made the political choice of moving towards a universal health coverage system, has tripled health allocation over all sectors, and today 90% of our population has access to essential primary care services. We have also reached notable progress in the fields of maternal and child health. TB, resistant TB, HIV/AIDS is almost eradicated. And we have implemented successfully a program of hepatitis C elimination with the support of the US CDC, WHO, and other private partners, creating thus the first ever precedent of nationwide chronic illness eradication through treatment in the world. And that is a big hope. We still have important challenges to overcome, but I'm proud that just 2 weeks ago, we announced the launch of a center for child oncology with the support of the USAID. And we hope that this project will be the basis for international cooperation in Georgia. Excellencies, climate changes, it is clear to us, affect each individual, each country, and we are already feeling directly its effects, and we understand our responsibility to act and preserve our planet so that our children have a place to live. There are territories turning into deserts and flooded by rising seas. Or destroyed by hurricanes like we have just witnessed, or by fires. Georgia, as a party to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, is fully committed to the objectives of the convention and aligns with the findings of the IPCC. Subsequently, Georgia has updated its nationally determined contribution in parallel with the elaboration of the Climate Action Plan for the period 2021-2030, ensuring the GHG emissions by 2030 will stay by 40% below the recorded level in 1990. The Climate Summit demonstrated the momentum and showed the potential to leap forward by giving the climate community more ambitious measures for implementing the Paris Agreement. Georgia, as many small countries, doesn't have industries that produce greenhouse gases, but like any other state, we feel the impact and we adapt. We aim to build a climate-resilient Georgia and to reduce climate-driven losses. Georgia represents today a unique reservoir of biodiversity of fauna and flora with a great number of endemic species. We are conscious that this unique geographic situation and our unique biodiversity has to be preserved for the future of our planet. And thus we are developing an integrated climate policy led by the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change and putting in place climate-friendly incentives in the energy sector, as well as green economy and energy efficiency policies. Prevention is key. It's true that we can't control the weather, but there is nothing inevitable about natural disasters. What's more, by helping local communities to understand and reduce disaster risk, Georgia is strengthening a culture of resilience that is a core value of democracy and self-government. Finally, Mr. President, distinguished delegates, we cannot fight together if we do not share the same basic values. One of them is democracy. It is what allows for the full involvement, the full responsibility, and the full commitment of each and every citizen in this global war against global threats that we are embarking upon. It has been 28 years that Georgia chose to become or to re-become a democratic country that it was during its first independence. Gradually, we've moved from a presidential republic to a parliamentary system. We have moved through peaceful transition of power to a more and more transparent and open electoral system. The adoption of a fully proportional system for the upcoming parliamentary elections of 2020 might even result in a coalition government. Pluralistic and vivid media has become a reality in today's Georgia. Reporters Without Borders ranks Georgia 60th, a staunch progression from ranking a few years ago 104th. The last decision of the Strasbourg Human Rights Court reinforces the property rights, including in the media sector, and has resulted in more pluralism. The new constitution adopted last year reaffirms the strict principle of separation of powers, all fundamental rights, and sets a high standard by introducing a large set of new social rights, making it one of the progressive constitutions of the world. And so was the 1921 Constitution of Georgia, which recognized early on the right of women to vote and to be elected, 5 women were participating in the first Constituent Assembly. Georgia was a country where the first ever Muslim woman was elected. And today I am among the 11 women presidents of the world and the first women president in our region. Georgia is now embarked on its 4th wave of judicial reform, which aims at ensuring a higher standard of independence of the judiciary, building public confidence in the court system. This stage is the most delicate and the one for which we need increased support and assistance from partners. Progress is already there and can be measured. The number of complaints submitted by Georgian citizens to the Strasbourg Human Rights Court of Justice has in the past 6 years decreased 11 times from 40,053 to 415. Georgia is rated 41 out of 126 states in the Rule of Law Index survey of 2019. Beyond the law adopted in 2014 on elimination of all forms of discrimination, we're taking also important steps toward ensuring equality and safety in labor relations, employment, and occupation, and prohibiting sexual harassment, as well as developing the Code on the Rights of the Child, fully aligned with the Convention. Mr. President, let me conclude. 50 years ago, yes, we had a dream and man landed on the moon. We shall not forget how difficult this was in terms of human, financial, scientific resources and sacrifices, and we faced them. Today we have a new challenge, a new dream. The Agenda 2030 is probably the most ambitious global agenda humanity has ever designed, and it could be summed up by a simple message: come back to Earth. We have inherited one planet, and it is where Georgians want to live peacefully. We have all to remember that we have only one life to live and only one planet to save. Romantic Paravdet.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Georgia for the statement just made. The adequate representatives remain seated while we greet Madam President. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Faustin Touadera, President of the Central African Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency on behalf of the General Assembly. I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations, His Excellency President Faustin Touadera of the Central African Republic, and to invite him to address the Assembly. Mr. President.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President of the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, coming together once again as the great family of the international community for the 74th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I should like to begin by offering to you, Mr. President, Professor Tijani Mohammed Bande, my sincere and warm congratulations upon your brilliant election to preside over our work. Your election is the symbol of the well-deserved honor and tribute paid to the entire African continent, and in particular to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, your country. I remain convinced that your consummate command of the international arena, as well as your exceptional personal qualities, constitute an asset and a guarantee of the success of our work. I should also like to take this opportunity to commend the quality of the work done and the results achieved by Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces during the 73rd session. Here we pay tribute to her and express our gratitude and our appreciation. Allow me also to reiterate my gratitude and my confidence in Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, for his continued commitment to peace and development around the world, and above all, for the constant and multifaceted support he has offered to the Central African Republic. Mr. President, this 74th session takes place in a particular context, at a time when the world is facing threats to international peace and security, terrorism, poverty, climate change, or indeed the phenomenon of migration. I come here today, therefore, to share with you the concerns and the contribution of my country around the theme of galvanizing multilateral efforts for poverty eradication, quality education, climate action, and inclusion. The relevance of this theme is equaled only by the challenges that the world currently faces. The peoples of the world have seen the movement of globalization nurture in them this common dream of seeing the world become a genuine global village. And yet, alas, we have never seen so many walls and barriers that we are subjected of nationalism and a retreat into identity politics. The rejection of the other and extremism are being expressed ever more violently. It goes without saying that such opportunities give us an opportunity, a moment for individual introspection and exchange, so that together we can overcome the challenge of building bridges of brotherhood and peace, which know no borders. If together we make a leap forward and pool our efforts, we will be able to overcome the various hotbeds of tension and crisis that still exist around the world. No country, no nation is safe from the threats currently facing humanity. The challenge that we face as leaders is to have the courage to dare to question ourselves, to find innovative, efficient, and effective solutions to build peace and stability, and to create a robust foundation for sustainable development. Several of our countries, including my own, are experiencing a security situation which remains a source of concern and deserves the full attention of the international community. We must therefore keep in mind that as long as one of our member states is not at peace, the entire community of nations is affected. The situation in the Middle East is particularly grievous for international security. We maintain our call for the peaceful, just, and equitable solution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on the two-state solution, two states living in perfect symbiosis and harmony within safe and recognized borders. At the same time, we call on the entire international community to invest in finding genuine peace in respect for international law for Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. In Africa, the state of affairs shows that the proliferation of small arms and light weapons constitutes a real threat to peace and security. Now more than ever, our states need to combine their efforts and pool their resources, particularly in the spheres of intelligence, prevention, and early warning. The example of the ECOWAS-ECAS Joint Summit in Lomé in July 2018 should inspire further concerted and coordinated action at a time when the spread of small arms and light weapons is defying national borders. The resulting situations of insecurity remind us that the effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty would tangibly reduce this threat facing our continent. In this respect, the Central African Republic firmly supports the actions undertaken by our organization under the leadership of the Security Council to achieve general and complete disarmament of our planet, both when it comes to weapons of mass destruction and also conventional weapons. Mr. President, while development requires a minimum level of peace, it is also true that peace cannot prosper in the enclaves of abject poverty and insecurity that offer a distressing picture for all the world to see. Beyond words that confirm our good intentions, let us drive a virtuous momentum of poverty eradication through concrete and strong action. This action should help us to come up with new forms of social protection for all. This action needs to contribute to generating wealth, the equitable distribution of which, with the aim of a common subsistence minimum, is among those factors that help avoid conflicts. And it is here that, along the same lines as the deep-rooted aspirations of my people, I committed my government to producing the plan for the recovery and peace building in Central Africa, which takes into account the main thrusts of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, as well as those of the 2063 Agenda of the African Union. Challenges linked to the transformation both of the world and of our countries requires our populations having the tools that they need so that they can remain active players in an ever-changing world. In order to do this, in the wake of national reconstruction, my country intends to invest in education that combines quality with the efficient use of resources. Investing in pupils, but also investing in teachers, that is what we intend to do. And in my country, which is emerging from crisis, all of our efforts should be focused on the opportunities that are offered by new technologies. What's more, we want to open up an international discussion on the subject of education, so that we can avoid a number of traps, such as education programs for all, which end up simply being nothing more than literacy classes when the resources don't follow those programs to support good quality education. Good quality education is the tool that should be used as a basis for more lasting, more harmonious development, whilst also constituting a solid bastion against extremism in all its forms. Mr. President, while we applaud the progress that has been made in recent years in terms of the development of our countries, even though it does remain unequal, we must also think deeply about the action of humankind on its environment. The abusive exploitation of natural resources is one of the causes of climate change, which is disrupting and selling out the future of humanity. Even though my country, the Central African Republic, is far from being a major polluter, we stand in solidarity with the international action being taken to preserve our planet. This is our historic responsibility. I firmly call for the effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and for its ratification by all states parties. Here, we firmly hope to see a substantial reduction in carbon emissions by developed countries and the honoring of financial commitments in respect of carbon credits, as well as the strengthening of resilience of developing countries against climate disasters. Without coming up with new actions to take, our collective responsibility is to implement all of our commitments. including the resolutions from COP24, as well as the recommendations issued by the Addis Ababa Conference for Financing for Sustainable Development, which allowed us to reiterate our support for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Mr. President, from all of the aforementioned, we see clearly that combining the efforts of the member states of our organization in the framework of multilateral action is the cornerstone of success in our shared ideal of a more just, more balanced, safer world for everybody. I take as evidence the mobilization of international solidarity, which allowed my country to open a new chapter in its history, thanks to the signing, under the auspices of the African Union, of the political agreement for peace and reconciliation between my government and the 14 armed groups on the 16th of February 2019. Today, we are mobilized for the implementation of this agreement with the support of the guarantors, the African Union and ECAS, as well as facilitators, chief among whom figure the United Nations through MINUSCA. With the support of our partners from the sub-region and the entire world, we are making modest but definite progress in extending the authority of the state across the entire national territory, as well as reforming the security and defense sectors, which will facilitate the progressive redeployment of the defense and security forces and allow for the continuation of the national DDRR program that has already been begun. We also welcome the launch of the development programs that have recently been carried out to demonstrate that the initial dividends of peace are indeed a reality. Mr. President, without denying how satisfied we are with the unique momentum that has been given to peace by the signing of this agreement, a great deal remains to be done. My country's situation remains fragile in spite of some genuine progress. Armed groups continue to be supplied with weapons and ammunition through illicit routes. They are committing mass and repeated violations of international humanitarian law and human rights law. But as you know, the legal and legitimate forces of the Central African Republic are the only ones to be struck by the embargo, thereby depriving the state of the resources it needs to fulfill its mission to protect its citizens and its territory. Along the same lines as the government of the Central African Republic, the member states of the Standing Advisory Committee of the United Nations on Security Questions in Central Africa supported the call for the lifting of this embargo during the 48th ministerial meeting in May 2019 in Kinshasa. Today, I applaud the unanimous vote of the Security Council on Resolution 2488/2019, which allowed for the easing of the arms embargo in respect of our defense and security forces. However, I solemnly repeat the request of the government and the legitimate aspiration of the people of the Central African Republic for the total lifting of this embargo to allow the state to extend its authority across the entire national territory with a view to protecting civilian populations. Indeed, the midterm report on the 15th of June 2019 submitted by my government demonstrates that the conditions set by the Sanctions Committee have been met, as well as significant progress made in the process of reforming the defense and security sectors. Mr. President, to overcome the crisis that has shaken my country, and very much in line with the theme of this session, I call for dynamic, concerted, coherent, and coordinated multilateral action. I express the hope that the international community will remain mobilized alongside the people and government of the Central African Republic and will continue to support them for the recovery of my country. Thank you.
I thank President Touadera for the statement just made. May I request delegations to remain their seat while we greet Mr. President. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Iván Duque Márquez, President of the Republic of Colombia. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Colombia, and to invite him to address the Assembly, Mr. President.
Señor Vicepresidente.
Vice President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and of government and heads of missions, I would like to take this opportunity to convey my greetings to the President of the General Assembly and also to the Secretary General of this organization, Antonio Guterres. 1 year ago, I addressed this assembly for the first time, laying out before you our roadmap for the crafting of a Colombia based on the rule of law, entrepreneurship, and equity. My country, which this year, 2019, is celebrating 200 years of history as an independent nation, is today charting a course towards a future of equity, where the only thing that will keep a man or a woman from following their dreams is the degree of their willingness to pursue said dreams by the sweat of their own brows. We are living in an era in which it is vital that none of us allow ourselves to be distracted from the most urgent challenges that confront us, putting an end to extreme poverty, the defense of democracy, the protection of the environment, the promotion of entrepreneurship and innovation, and the upholding of the rule of law. These are the ethical, social, and political touchstones that guide the future that we desire for Colombia. And these touchstones also shape our contribution to an international order based on multilateralism, solidarity, and autonomy. We believe sincerely and openly in the rule of law, in entrepreneurship, and in equity. These are not empty words for us. The most daunting challenge before us all is that of climate change. And of course, its related consequences for our oceans, for our alpine tundras and moorlands, for the snow-covered uplands and mountain peaks, for our glaciers and for our coasts. As I have oft repeated throughout this week, Colombia is responsible for a mere 0.4% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. Our energy grid is the sixth cleanest in the world. We are home to 50% of the alpine tundras or paramos of the world, and more than 40% of our territory can be truly described as being covered with tropical rainforest, much of that located in our Amazon region. But Colombia is also one of the countries most vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change. And for that reason, we believe that all of us must reflect on the best global response, to be sure, but we must also be capable of acting locally. A scant few days ago, we all witnessed the young people of this planet coming together to demand that we take action. Their words rang true, and so, presidents, heads of government, I think it is true that we can say the time is nigh to move from words to action. And I can say truthfully before you all that Colombia is indeed taking action. We have declared our biodiversity to be a strategic asset, incorporating the protection thereof within our national security policy. We are under no illusion whatsoever, in our particular case, that deforestation in the Amazon and in all of the wooded regions of our country is directly linked to illegal activity, to armed groups operating outside the law who seek spaces for their illicit activities, fueled principally by drug trafficking. In one short year, we have committed to and we have succeeded in reducing levels of deforestation by roughly 17%, and we are more committed than ever to continuing on this track. Moreover, we have set ourselves the goal of planting 180 million trees by the year 2022, so that together, moving forward in lockstep, we can protect our common home, Mother Earth. With great pride, I can share with this Assembly that at the beginning of this same month, September, together with Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Guyana, and Suriname, all of whom are Amazon nations, we signed the Leticia Pact. This is an international commitment to protecting the Amazon. To succeed in that goal, we will need to properly assess the risks the Amazon faces and champion successful counter-strategies. The Leticia Pact strengthens our capacity to manage, protect, and prevent any damage to this common heritage of mankind, crucial as it is to our very existence. We will protect the Amazon and the Amazon regions in our respective countries whilst upholding sovereignty, as that is the appropriate model we should follow to tackle our joint problems. When it comes to protecting nature or to the fight against drug trafficking and transnational crime, whether it be a case of defending democracy and freedom, or whether we be speaking of strengthening free trade or handling the flows of migration, we have to come together. We have to be united to draw up and strengthen multilateral governance responses and approaches that will allow us to take stock of where we stand, properly identify the problems without flinching, and plot roadmaps to move towards a solution to said problems. My fellow delegates, we must work to forge a society that is more conscious of the reality that our individual time on Earth is fleeting, but the damage we can leave in our wake can be permanent. Our capacity to create new alternatives and paradigms for development needs to be backstopped by our creativity in order to ensure that we avoid any negative impact by our future actions. A year ago, as my government took office, barely 0.1% of our energy matrix was tied to unconventional renewable energies, such as solar energy or wind energy. And we set ourselves the goal as an incoming government of boosting that level and of moving from the some 50 megawatts of output that we were seeing at the time we took office to an output of 1,500 megawatts by the end of our mandate. This is a genuine energy and environmental revolution. It's a major pledge made to our environment. We know that this is a major challenge. More action is required by each and every one of us, by the international community, by business leaders, and by the leaders of civil society. But I trust, I believe that together we can walk this path and pull in the same direction. We believe in the heady mix of the rule of law, in the promotion of entrepreneurship, and in the quest for equity. And it is against that backdrop that we seek to succeed in our aim of closing social and economic divides and gaps. Today, I can truthfully say to all of you that we have been unflagging in our attempts to overhaul our productive model in Colombia. Today, more than ever before, Colombia is firmly on track towards an innovative economy based on value-added services. And it is for that reason that we support and that we will continue to staunchly support the setting up of family, micro, small, medium, and large enterprises. We will continue to support the orange economy. We will continue to support new technological developments and each and every idea and aspiration that entrepreneurs propose to ensure that the world at large can benefit from the ingenuity, the efforts, and the optimism of the people of Colombia. With this mindset, and fully aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals through our own development plan that frames our actions for the next few years, the Pact for Colombia, the Pact for Equity, and a legislative package of measures for economic regalvanization, we are succeeding in reducing the tax burden for our businesses, and we are putting forward incentives in order to ensure that our country can compete on an unhandicapped basis in all international markets. As the fruit of these initiatives, at a time of major headwinds for the regional economy, indeed for the global economy, we are growing above the average rate for countries in the region. And this economic growth rate has attracted the attention of investors from around the world. Without a shadow of a doubt, we are a resilient nation that innovates and grows with equity. That is Colombia today. For that reason, today, despite the myriad obstacles ranged against us, Colombia is plowing ahead with the forging of a culture of the rule of law, under which, whilst recognizing our differences, we choose as a society to pursue coexistence peacefully, a coexistence in which the rule of law stands as the indissoluble union of justice and security. A year ago, I declared before you all here in this assembly hall that my government would continue to work for the process of demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, and to ensure that said process will be successful. Today, I come to tell you that the work remains to be done, but a firm step towards that end has been taken towards our goal of peace based on law. Today, more than 29 collective productive projects have been rolled out, bringing together 1,934 people who are using them to forge a new life. And in total, more than 13,000 Colombians continue to be part of the process of reintegration into broader society. Satisfied that we are sparing no effort and cannot be accused of idleness, I am able to stand before you all and say that today I'm speaking on behalf of a single unified nation, convinced of the need to stamp out violence using the tools of the law. I wish to reiterate my appreciation for the invaluable support and work of the United Nations Verification Mission. The support and backing of the international community has been absolutely essential in this process of stabilization. And we genuinely hope that the international community will continue to accompany us on this path that we are forging for ourselves, this path of peace within the framework of the law. And in the same way that we have sworn to support those who choose the path of legality and indeed are so supporting them, we also warn those who wish to persist in a life of crime of the consequences of that choice. A scant few weeks ago, a group of drug terrorists sought to intimidate Colombia, hiding behind claims of ideological goals. But the reality is that these groups have not enjoyed the fruits of reintegration nor disarmament simply because they did not choose to. They have not left behind their life of crime. They have lied to Colombian Colombians, and they have aligned themselves with the dictatorship which is oppressing the people of Venezuela. In their attempt to intimidate us, they were met foursquare by a government that will not bow before threats. And above all, they found themselves resisted by a people that will not be cowed and that were rather outraged when these criminal groups sought to clothe their claims in righteousness. Let there be no room for doubt. As president of all Colombians, I will do my utmost. I will use all tools available to me to guarantee that Colombia enjoys peace based on the rule of law. And in this conviction, we will not give even a millimeter of ground. The violence that flared up a few weeks ago finds its support in the illegal economies based principally on drug trafficking. When my government took office, we found ourselves faced with some 200,000 hectares that had been planted with coca plants across the country. But we have made huge efforts since then, and for the first time in 7 years, we have been able to stop the previous exponential growth of said coca plantations in its tracks. In the time that my government has been in office, we've been able to eradicate and substitute with legal crops more than 90,000 hectares, and we will not stop here. We will not rest on our laurels. Drug trafficking preys on the environment, on human society. It is a viper's nest of corruption, and it is the lifeblood of terrorism. The more coca that is grown, the less peace that we will have. And for this reason, the fight against drug trafficking and the illicit economies that underpin it is a battle that requires the buy-in and support of all nations as we seek to stamp out the perversions of the production, distribution, and consumption of drugs. No country is safe from this threat. Drug trafficking is a global problem, and so it must be met with a global response. I can say with conviction that one of the worst consequences of drug trafficking is the degree to which it fuels corruption, the degree to which it weakens institutions, and the way in which it poisons and rips apart the fabric of society. The fight against corruption unifies all of us here in this room, and it also unifies each and every Colombian. We stand together in the fight against this blight, this stain on humanity, corruption. There is no political, social, or cultural system that will not be led to the brink if its institutions are poisoned with the venom of corruption. In Colombia, we are taking effective measures for transparency, such as the accountability law, which governs the actions of all public servants of the nation. We're not alone in this fight. Together with friendly nations, we are driving forward a project to establish the International Anti-Corruption Court, because just like drug trafficking, this scourge of corruption is no respecter of borders, and the international community needs a strong tool that will allow it to withstand and push back against the phenomenon of transnational corruption. Colombia is a firm proponent of multilateralism as a way of integrating not just economies, ideas, and policies, but also because we believe that multilateralism is the fount of the solutions we seek to the problems we are faced with. Solutions that need to be based on inalienable principles such as solidarity, brotherhood, the love for freedom, full respect for the decisions of peoples and their right to make such decisions for themselves, and the unfettered defense of democracy. Solutions anchored in the rejection of any form of tyranny and based on the economic pillars of free trade, the rights of workers, and freedom to innovate. Since 2015, at least 4.2 million people have fled Venezuela, pushed to that dramatic step by the brutal dictatorship of Nicolas Maduro. They flee from a nation that was wealthy and is now in the abyss, that cannot feed its people. They are fleeing from a country that was a flourishing democracy and is now an authoritarian regime without a functioning media nor freedoms. A country that lived in peace and whose people are now suffering oppression, that was an economic power, and whose economy now lies in ruins, and its citizens have no choice but to jump ship. Colombia has hosted approximately 1.4 million Venezuelans who are fleeing hunger and despair. And we are doing so aware of our responsibility. We have welcomed them with open arms, motivated by the ethical principles of solidarity and brotherhood. Precisely because we understand the due difference that exists between our brother peoples of Venezuela and the regime which is crushing them beneath its boot, we extend the hand of friendship to our brothers and sisters who continue to flood across our border. We know full well that solidarity and fraternity must take the guise of tangible material actions and policies. We have rolled out various instruments and vehicles to support Venezuelans. We have played host to 25,000 children of Venezuelan parents who have been born on Colombian soil since 2017 and who run the risk of being left stateless. Every child around the world has the right to a nationality, and with affection, with warmth, and with determination, nation, Colombia, has provided that statehood to these 25,000 children. The migration crisis that we warned of a year ago in this very chamber is a reality. It gets worse every day because the dictatorship in Venezuela continues in power. The Venezuelan tragedy has a name, and we all know what that name is. Colombia's stance in response to the dictatorship in Venezuela is not a matter of geopolitical dispute or point scoring. Rather, we adopt this stance driven by the need that we see for the Venezuelan people to have their democracy restored. We're not calling just for the freedom in Venezuela alone. The Lima Group and more than 50 nations around the world have duly recognized the legitimate presidency of Juan Guaido, and they are actively participating in denouncing and shedding light on all the crimes of the current dictator. As President of Colombia, I make a respectful appeal to all of you, calling on you all, together within the framework of international law, diplomacy, and the instruments of multilateralism, to work together to restore to Venezuela its democracy, to restore to Venezuela its freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to call a spade a spade. The Venezuelan dictatorship is one more link in the chain of transnational terrorism. Its corrupt structures are the handmaidens of drug cartels. Its followers are adherents of the mafia and fuel the violence in Colombia. The dictatorship plays refuge to murderers and the rapists of children. And those who ignore these facts are, by their silence, accomplices of the dictatorship. They are complicit with its actions. My government has credible and resounding proof that corroborate the support lent by the Venezuelan dictatorship to criminal and drug trafficking groups and narco-terrorist groups that are operating in Venezuela and pursuing their activities in Colombia as an assault on our nationhood. As President of Colombia, I will hand over the evidence underpinning this claim to the President of this Assembly and to the Secretary General of the United Nations. This dossier, which I hold up before you now, of 128 pages, contains overwhelming proof that demonstrates the complicity of the regime of Nicolas Maduro with the terrorist cartels who are attacking the people of Colombia. Addressing the international community, I say that we will submit to your attention a list of some 20 criminals who betrayed the generosity of the Colombians and today reside in various cities of Venezuela, supported by and protected by the Venezuelan dictatorship. We will also reveal to you the location of more than 1,438 armed men belonging to the most dangerous and radical wings of the ELN. And we can also share with you, we will indeed share with you, 207 sites controlled by this criminal organization, the ELN, in Venezuelan territory. The testimonies of Venezuelan citizens who complain of the presence of the ELN in their territory and the undeniable presence of these criminals in training camps in these areas, as well as the existence of 20 landing strips used for the nefarious and underground activities of drug traffickers, are unequivocal proof of the dictatorship's sponsorship of these criminal structures of transnational organized crime. Venezuela, my fellow presidents, has become a breeding ground for criminal activities linked to the ELN. Criminal activities which are no respected for borders. Those strong men and those criminals that today enjoy the support and refuge provided by Nicolas Maduro are the same people who for years attacked our wind farms, causing irreparable environmental damage. This conduct cannot be countenanced. And as head of state of Colombia, I have a duty to denounce what's going on before the international community. Let yourselves not be deceived. Colombia is not, has never been, and will never be an aggressor state. We will not allow ourselves to be provoked into such action by bellicose insinuations, but we will always raise our voice to denounce tyranny. Venezuela, my fellow delegates, needs to see an end to the usurpation of power under which it is currently suffering. It needs to see the installation of a government of transition towards democracy, a government that will allow for economic and social recovery and rebuilding. Venezuela needs the urgent convening of genuinely free and fair elections, and it needs the full restoration of the rule of law across the land. The crimes of Nicolas Maduro against his people can be justly compared with those of Slobodan Milosevic in the former Yugoslavia. We cannot sit idly by and merely watch this suffering in our beloved Latin America. And for that reason, on the 23rd of September, the day before yesterday, the 30th meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the Organization of American States, acting as the advisory body for the implementation of the Inter-American Treaty on Reciprocal Aid and Assistance, adopted a historic resolution. In said resolution, it indicated that the participation of authorities and entities linked to the regime of Nicolas Maduro in illegal activities, in particular in drug trafficking, asset laundering, terrorism and the financing thereof, corruption and the violation of human rights, are a regional threat. For 16 countries in Latin America, it is glaringly obvious that the dictatorship in Venezuela is violating the obligations established in Resolution 1373 of the year 2001, a resolution of the United Nations Security Council. For that reason, we reaffirm resoundingly before you all that the set of criminal activities tied as they are, or the causes they are, of the humanitarian crisis triggered by the deterioration of the political, economic and social situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela represent a threat to the maintenance of peace and security in our continent of Latin America. I want to reiterate, I want to hammer home the point that this challenge needs to be met by ongoing collective action as a tangible vehicle of the principle of global solidarity. And said action in response to what we're seeing in Venezuela needs to be multilateral at all times and to uphold the primacy of multilateralism. We are a loud and clear voice in the region calling upon the regime of Maduro to end its support for narco-terrorist groups. We urge the international community to adopt the commensurate measures and sanctions to safeguard the rights and freedoms of the present and future generations of Colombians, and indeed, as I hope goes without saying, of our Venezuelan brothers and sisters. In light of the aforementioned, here, where the world comes together on this stage, in this chamber, I pledge to you solemnly that Colombia will continue to defend democracy in Venezuela. But my fellow delegates, without your support, without the support of each and every one of you, without your genuine support, those who fled Venezuela dreaming of the day when they could return home will find that path to return home cut off from them forever. We will continue working actively and passionately for the forging of a Colombia where the rule of law prevails, a Colombia of entrepreneurship that promotes individual initiatives, dreams and freedoms, and which closes social gaps and divides. All of our efforts as a government drive towards that aim, that dream of equity. Today, Colombia declares to the world that time has come where we must make a choice to transform our societies. The time has come to stand firm, to resist tyranny. This is a time of greatness. We must take action to ensure that each and every citizen in this world can live with dignity. Thank you very much indeed.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Colombia, for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state.